knows about my Christmas crackers.
Yes. Well, that's
It could be much worse, Tracy.
Well, welcome everybody to a new Public Utilities Commission. You don't have a chairperson yet, so I will call the meeting to order. And the first thing that you all need to do is select someone to be the chairperson.
Is
Don't
Craig
everybody
tuned
jump
in
and
yet?
volunteer.
Yeah, Craig's avoiding this. He's busy trying to shuffle the papers on his desk.
Well, I printed it. Well, I thought I printed it all off yesterday, but I was missing a few pages, so just got it done. Okay.
Well, if nobody's going to volunteer, then somebody has to volunteer somebody else.
So who's the longest standing member at this point in time with the most experience?
Ha, ha, ha. I guess that would be me.
Okay, then I nominate Ann. I'm trying to find my notes here. Hang on.
If it's a matter of running the meetings, I certainly know how to do that. If it's a matter of years of public utilities experience, I'm not there yet. So
it's mostly running the meetings, occasionally signing documents, and every once in a while we'll ask to take your picture.
I can handle all that.
Well, then I'll second that nomination.
If everybody just shakes their heads like this, then we'll go ahead and say Ann's the chairperson. Take it away.
All right. I have to pull up now if I go to my agenda, can you still see me?
We can see you right now.
Okay, I can't see you, but that doesn't matter, I guess, since I'm looking at the agenda on my computer. That's why. So need to take the roll call then, or?
Sure.
All right. So Ann Potts,
looks like everyone's here.
Commissioner and new chair here. Tracy, Craig?
Yep, here.
Yep.
You're here? Okay.
We're all here.
Great. Let's approve the consent agenda.
Consent agenda. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, does anyone have anything to say about it? No? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You'll have to do roll call votes on everything
All right.
while we're still online. So
Okay, so one at a time, you mean?
call a name out. They'll
Okay.
say yes or no.
Okay, approve the agenda. Ann approves the agenda. Tracy?
Yes.
Craig?
Aye, yes.
All right, the agenda is approved. Next would be the meeting minutes from the last meeting.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that you have to go through each item on the consent agenda separately. I just mean that every time you vote, you have to take a roll call vote.
Got it. All right.
Does that just involve the three of us?
That's correct.
Okay, Craig, we got this one. Okay.
There's three of us.
All right, so Mike, can we move on to D, or are we going to go through the minutes and the payments report?
Yep, you're going to go right to D.
All right. The distributed energy generation and net metering policy that was found in our packets.
Yep.
Mike, will you talk about this, or?
I'm going to talk for just a second, not necessarily about this directly, but just about everything. So you're all new here, and there's a lot of complicated things that the PUC does, obviously. And so when we're writing memos to talk about these sorts of policies or contracts or other issues, we don't assume that you understand what all the terms are. It's a lot of jargon and nonsense that you could probably use some background on, and we don't know what you're going to need background on. And we also don't want to write 20-page memos for 6 months, because that's probably more than you need. And so instead, I think we just want to work through each of these issues with you letting us know what background you'd like to have. We provide it at the meeting, and try to do some educating on the fly. And otherwise, we can just kind of jump right in and try to get our work done. You know, you're all three experienced city people, so you kind of know how the organization works and have been around the block with some of that stuff. So we have all the confidence that you'll be able to deal with this stuff, even without the deep background information. And so Shane's going to talk about this first issue.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, this is a updated policy and rules for distributed energy resource generation, this is basically solar. How our customers connect to our distribution system when they put up new solar installations. And the reason you're looking at this big long document is because the state of Minnesota decided to update their application process, and they created a uniform process for interconnection. And so now we are using, and Ann will remember from the previous term that we're using application system through a company called Star Energy Services, and they have an online application system that our customers can use to apply to interconnect their solar installations with our distribution system, and that is called Nova. And there's a link on the city's website. You can click around on the Nova website, but the Nova site kind of complies with all the new the application template that the state is using. And so the rules and policies are basically just how the state and now the PUC governs interconnection. And so there's some language in there, and then there's a uniform contract that's a statewide uniform contract for interconnection. And yeah, Mike, did I cover that pretty well, or you're smirking like maybe I didn't?
Well, I mean, there's just so much detail in this that it's hard to know who wants to know what. I think it's probably a good time to just ask that. Who's got questions?
I'll ask a question. So if I'm tracking a little bit, the state is just updating things. They put some stuff, if it wasn't already, on an online application. But does this just involve individuals, or does this also involve, like, if the city had some kind of shared solar whatever thing, or is it truly just for individuals?
This is just individuals.
Okay.
And the state didn't put this put an online application system out. They just put a template out for applying, and we're contracting with a company that puts that online to make it easier for us to comply with the new rules the state has put in place, which are quite complex. Beyond what we can do, we don't have a city engineer on staff to handle all of the requirements for the application.
So what's the connection then between the city and individuals? Is it just at a big level? How can you connect me? If this is an individual trying to, I assume, get their solar capacity shared, is that right?
Yeah.
Then how does the city get if it's state?
So let's just say a customer has solar on their building.
Mm-hmm.
And generally they're going to use more power than they're generating with their solar system.
Yep.
And so the net effect is that they just buy less power from us. And then there's really that's not a complicated relationship. That's a pretty easy one. But if there are times when they produce more power than they're using, then they're going to want to be paid for selling that power back into the grid. Mm-hmm. And the state has rules about how we do that. Actually, the federal government has laws about who gets to do that and how we have to handle it. So this situation is just trying to say, well, how are we going to evaluate when someone applies to build solar and interconnect it with our system? What are the things that they have to show us, and what is the contractual relationship we're going to have with them that talks about how they would be reimbursed? And they've got some choices to make about that. So this is just our policy that kind of governs that whole relationship.
Okay, I get it now. I was putting the individual right to the state, but state's giving the city guidelines, so the individual's connecting with the city when it comes time to potentially sell X. Okay, that helps. I got it
You
now.
got it.
All right, thanks.
Is there anything else in particular, Shane or Mike, that we should be noting in this agreement that's different than it was, or of import that we should keep track of? Or
I think that one thing to think about is how we pay these folks for any power that they might produce that's sold back onto the grid. And right now, we're just paying our retail rate to those folks. So if they buy power from us, it's 11 cents a kilowatt hour. If we're buying power from them, it's 11 cents a kilowatt hour. And that is not particular. That's not exactly required by law. We have the ability to try and create a rate structure that accounts for how we're subsidizing their ability to sell back onto the system, because it's really not worth the retail rate for us to have them producing power and solar panels on their buildings. So I think the way we've got it set up now is about as generous as can be for folks that want to do renewable energy on their buildings. And if there was ever a time in the future we wanted to think about changing that, that's something to just kind of keep in mind. I think based on how the PUC has historically talked about this, at least for the past 5 or 6 years, we're at the place where you wanted us to be right now, which is let's make this as easy as possible for folks to install solar. And at the level that we have of folks that are doing that, the amount of subsidy is pretty negligible. It's not something worth our time spending a lot of resources doing analyses and coming up with new rates.
Mm-hmm.
But if we get 50 or 100 customers, that might be something we need to start thinking about. So, and I think that's the goal, is to get a lot of customers that are doing this.
Sure. What's your estimate? I know I'm sure it varies wildly depending on the season and so on, but what's your estimate of how much the city is paying back to people right now, like per month?
I think generally we don't pay people back at all. They use more than they produce.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm not too worried about that. I would say that, like, if we counted up all the value of credits that people get, it's probably in the hundreds in a year. I doubt it's even in the thousands. So.
Okay. Great. So, Shane, you need us to approve this? Or Mike, you need us to approve this?
Yeah, there's a model resolution in the packet that Shane provided.
Right.
And basically it's just approving these rules.
Okay. Would someone like to move to adopt that model resolution for our city?
Craig's busy. Okay. I will make what's the verb I want? Make a motion, thank you, that we approve this resolution regarding the model for paying and metering with solar. Is that the right way to say it? It's bigger than that, isn't it, Mike?
I don't know. I thought it sounded great. It only matters if the three of you think what it means. If those words are meaningful to you three.
We're all looking at the same document. It's probably fine.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, is there any further discussion about it? Okay.
Can I
Hearing
just add one thing? So this is your policy, right, that you're adopting.
yes,
It's based on model state language.
yes.
Our motivation for doing this at all is that the state changed their rules.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm not anticipating us spending a lot of time on this in the future, or like the only reason that we would want to change this policy is, something happens where we're getting a lot of customers or where the state had changed their rules again. Otherwise, this is probably just something we'll be using administratively and you won't see anymore.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. Any other further comments?
No, I figure if this is based on state guidelines and if they change or whatever, you're going to hear about it, right? And then, like you said, if something changes, we can rethink it. But it sounds like the basis is well thought out then. If it came from the state, I'll make an assumption.
Okay, are we ready to vote? Tracy?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
And Ann votes aye. All right. Sorry, I'm flipping through my windows. I have to get back to my agenda. Sorry.
It's okay.
My computer's frozen. I'm sorry. What is E?
SIMPA.
Thank you. Oh dear. There we are. SIMPA. Okay. I can see that in the future I'm going to need to print these out. I was trying to avoid wasting paper, but
Maybe we need to get you a second monitor.
oh, that's an idea.
We could set you up.
Something. Sorry about this thing. I'm sorry. I have kind of an old computer, and just so you know, Zoom doesn't work on here at all. I'm so glad we use Google Meet because that does work somehow. But I can't see my agenda right now. I'm sorry. So Mike, could you just say what E is? And
Yeah, we're going to talk about some SIMPA stuff.
okay.
So I did want to just get some real basic background on what SIMPA is, because it's absolutely crucial to the operation of our electric utility. It's an organization that you've probably heard the name used a lot. You've maybe even, dealt with some issues either at the city level or at the PUC level where they've been brought up and involved in it. But who are they? What are they? What's our relationship with them? So they're a consortium, a joint action agency is the legal term that is created in the state of Minnesota. It consists of 18 municipalities, the smallest of which is about our size, and the largest of which is Rochester. So, and they're located in Rochester. That's where their main offices are. But the organization itself is basically these 18 cities joining together to deal with the wholesale side of the power industry. So what our relationship is with this organization is we have what's called a power purchase agreement. This contract is between the city, the Grand Marais Public Utilities Commission, and Southern Minnesota Municipal Power Agency. And it says basically that we agree to buy all of the power that we need wholesale from SIMPA, and that they're obligated to sell everything that we need to us. So that's a good relationship for the most part. Although there's been some desire on our side to start branching out and doing some local generation. And you've probably even seen we have done some local generation product with solar panels on the Public Works garage, for instance. But every time we do something like that, that's something that we have to deal with SIMPA because of this power purchase agreement. We have to actually sell the power that those solar panels produce to SIMPA and then buy it back from them so that we're complying with the power purchase agreement. That power purchase agreement is the 18 power purchase agreements that make up SIMPA. That's basically everything that the organization is. When they go out and borrow money, that's what they're borrowing it based on, is these contracts they have to sell power to all of these cities. They're run by a board that's made up of members that are representative of some of the cities. There's also monthly meetings that the group has where representatives from all the cities and staff people from the organization attend. It's a very, very well run organization, and I think they'd be happy to either sit in on a Zoom call with us, or when it's appropriate, again, come back and visit us in Grand Marais and sit down and talk to you about the organization and answer any questions about it. But I tell you from my experience that we're fortunate to be involved with them, and that we certainly can get a lot more sophisticated in how we operate being a part of that group than we could do if we were on our own. Our contract with them, this power purchase agreement, runs until 2050 right now, so it's a pretty long-term deal. We also have a side deal with them where they pay us for the capacity of our power plant locally. That's been part of our relationship with them since we have been members, and it's been based on our 6 megawatt diesel plant that we built in 2003 since then. And what that payment is, $218,000, or is it $216,000? I can't remember which one it exactly is, a year. They pay just to have the opportunity to run the plant. And then we run the plant whenever they ask us to, which ends up being these days a few dozen hours a year, not very often. And the power that plant produces, SIMPA owns, and then they pay for the fuel costs of operating the plant. That's what our relationship looks like with SIMPA. Now, PURPA is the federal law that actually is the reason why we talked about the previous issue too, that allows customers to generate their own power and interconnect with their utility. So there's a few things about PURPA. One is they have something called qualified facilities. So you can only do that up to 40 kilowatts of power production. That's quite a bit. You know, you can see the panels that are on the co-op, for instance, that's not 40 kilowatts of power. We have 50 kilowatts on the Public Works garage, so that's a pretty big solar array. And anything above 40 kilowatts then is a negotiable kind of deal between the utility and the customer, rather than we have to take them on and we have to pay them based on the contract that you just approved. So, you know, when we say we're reimbursing our customers for the solar power that they provide, it's complicated by our relationship with SIMPA, because we can't pay Jay for the power out of his solar panels on his house. We have to buy that power from SIMPA. So SIMPA has to be involved in that relationship financially somehow. And this is really what this amended power purchase agreement contract is that's in your packet, is just trying to resolve that, making sure that we're still in compliance with the requirement to buy all of our power from SIMPA, and making sure that we're in compliance with PURPA and we're reimbursing customers for any power that they might produce at their house. So this, the PPA amendment describes that process, and basically it just says that SIMPA is going to pay us for a portion of the cost, the net cost that we have to reimburse our customers. And it's, you know, the formula is in the contract, but it's basically based on, you know, what their wholesale versus retail costs are to us. And again, it's going to be, you know, not hundreds even a year that they're going to end up reimbursing us. So it's not so much about the money as it is about making sure that we're in compliance with the law and with our contract with them. So what we're asking you to do then is to approve this contract, and then we'll send it to the city council, and they'll also have to approve it.
So does this, Mike, does this replace a contract we currently have with SIMPA, or is it an additional agreement?
It's amending it, so it's more like an addition than replacement.
Okay. Okay.
So a couple things. So the first piece that we just talked about with Shane, do the state guidelines influence these kinds of agreements at all? Do they talk to this? I mean, this is going to be a growing issue, right? do they provide? Or is it just this larger PURPA that really talks to this?
Well, I think the state guidelines are attempting to comply with PURPA.
Okay, so that goes that direction.
Yeah,
Okay.
and states have their own rules about it as well. You know, we're in a state that's pretty active on this stuff, and so we know if we're complying with the state's rules on it, we're also complying with the federal PURPA rules in Minnesota. The SIMPA and the contract with SIMPA, they try to stay fairly agnostic on that sort of thing. They don't want to be telling us how to do our policy when it comes to how we reimburse our customers. So they can have, of their 18 members, some of them are probably doing it how we're doing it, where they're just paying full retail, and some of them are probably doing special rates. You know, you can imagine in a city like Rochester, they have a significant amount of qualified facilities that they're reimbursing, you know, and some of them are quite a bit larger than 40 kilowatts as well. So I'm sure they've got a far more complex set of rules there. And this power purchase agreement amendment allows both of those situations. It doesn't really tell you how you have to do it.
How come they, to better accommodate this, how come they just don't say, you know, these groups that we may be buying power back from that can stay with us, why do they then just say it still needs to go all the way through them and back again?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So if we're obligated to buy everything from them, and why? So now they're just going to reimburse us if we have to pay back some of people who sell us their extra power. Why don't we just say we'll take their extra power? It doesn't have to go through SIMPA.
I don't know why we would say that.
I mean, it's so we could just keep it as opposed to saying we have to it has to go through to, you know, there'd be less that we'd have to buy from SIMPA. Maybe I'm just not saying this very well.
No, I think that's the situation, right? I mean, our meter that we pay SIMPA is at the substation, and all of these facilities are injecting power after that meter. So it's basically like we've got solar panels on our house that is the city of Grand Marais, that it's reducing the amount of kilowatts that we have to buy from the transmission line that comes into town. And
okay.
So that's what's happening. What we're doing with this agreement is just an accounting thing.
Okay.
But I think maybe the root of your question is, you know, why are we worrying about accounting on a couple $100 a year of kilowatts? You know, what's the principle that they're standing on, that they're requiring us to do this rather than just letting us have the, you know, couple hundred kilowatts from some other source?
No, I guess it really was back to my first part. You know, why are they still saying that we're required to buy everything from them? Is that not what the basic line is, that we have to buy everything from them?
That is, yeah, and they're very protective of that because that is their the basis of all of their financial situation. You know, every time they borrow money, what their bond rating looks like. It's those contracts, and I think that even a little crack in it is something that they would feel a little threatened by. Mm-hmm. But it's not a universal relationship that folks have in joint action agencies. Some of them do have a set aside or a cutout of a certain small percentage. There are some cities in SIMPA that have pre-existing deals where they're buying power from another source. So, I mean, it's a pretty deep issue with them, the whole idea of where you're buying the power from.
Yeah. Well, and then part of it, I was just thinking, then if this is where the future is going, and we see more of this, I mean, obviously they have to be anticipating this, and then what are they thinking? I do remember a while back, and it's not directly the same, but when we talked about having our own solar gardens or whatever, and they said, no, let's buy into the larger, that they would do the larger piece or whatever. I mean, to me, it's like, what are they thinking about the impact of solar to them as an organization? And it, because maybe it won't happen here, but if it does and we get a lot of people on solar, well, then that could loosen what we need to buy, right? At some point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're pretty realistic about the economics of it. So I don't think they expect there's going to be masses of local solar installations that are ever going to economically supplant the prices that we're able to provide as a utility. And the cost of solar has changed really, really dramatically. I mean, it's one of the cheaper. If you were starting from scratch, you'd build solar and wind right now over anything else because it's the cheaper option. But we're not starting from scratch, obviously. So they have a lot of pre-existing costs sunk into other things. It's maybe in the past 2 or 3 years, though, the attitude at SIMPA has changed really fast about looking into the future and a willingness to think about renewables as not just an option, but the option. We own a very large share of a coal-fired power plant as SIMPA, and their other chunk of that is owned by Xcel Energy, and Xcel Energy is talking about at 2030 we're not going to operate this thing anymore. So now SIMPA has been, for the past couple of years, starting that process as well as what are we going to do afterwards when we don't have that base load. And most of the models that I've seen are looking at utility scale solar and wind and then gas to kind of fill in the cracks. So it's been quite a ride, though, to see where they were 5 years ago talking about this was really not on the agenda very often. And where they're at now, where a lot of their actual financial planning is looking at building solar and wind, and it's exciting stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thanks. I probably distracted the conversation, but thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or want to talk about different parts of this agreement before we call for a vote? So, Mike, do we need a motion to adopt the amended and restated power purchase agreement? Would that be the way to say it? Okay. Can somebody make that motion, please?
It's your turn, Craig.
I'll make a motion to adopt the new agreement.
I'll
Okay.
second that.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Craig, how do you vote?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Ann votes aye. Okay. Our next item is the late fees.
Well, we got one more little SIMPA thing to do.
Oh, sorry.
That SIMPA asks each of its cities members to send a member representative and also designate an alternate representative. So last year, the member representative was George, and I was the alternate. So we need to redo that. And so I'm going to make a recommendation that you designate me as the member representative, and that we can talk about who the alternate should be. But I would recommend Shane right now, because he's been starting to get involved in some of the side projects that SIMPA has working, including our electric vehicle charging stations and some of the solar stuff, where it'll be useful for us to have him develop some relationships with them. We've had a commissioner as a member rep for a while now, but really it's been George is the only one that's done that. What it requires as a member rep is an attempt anyway to attend monthly member meetings that are, at least for a while, they've been held online. So it's been pretty, it's been three hours a month, for somebody to do that, which has been great for me to be able to participate a little heavier. But what they really want to get back to is their in-place meetings, which means that they drive around to the 18 different member cities on a monthly basis and have a meeting where we would probably have to travel anywhere between 4 and 7 hours to get there and spend the night and have a morning meeting and then drive back 4 and 7 hours. It's basically a day and a half of time commitment.
Mhm.
So that it usually makes more sense to have somebody that you're paying to take that kind of time than someone that's got another job that they might have to take time away from. But it'd be up to you all if it's something that you'd be interested in doing. But I also say that of the 18 member reps, they're all staff people other than George. So
I personally like the idea of you doing that, Mike, for the reasons you stated, and because you've got the ongoing full-time relationship, with this organization and in your job. So I would be happy to have it set up that way and have Shane be the alternate. What did Tracy and Craig think?
No.
Anyone?
Okay, I was waiting to see,
Yeah.
watching Craig's face. You want to go first, Craig?
Yeah, that's fine. No, I think that's fine, Mike. You can set that up. And then
Since things-
after you have those meetings, is there information that gets reported back? Or is information coming back to us then, or how does that work?
when there is action items for you to think about, like
Okay.
are on the agenda today, there's definitely information coming back. When there's things that happen that are relevant to us, like say, one of the things that SIMPA decided last year was rather than do a rate decrease, they would keep their rates flat and provide a one-time rebate to members based on their size. So that's something that we mentioned, as a after of the meeting. That of the 3 hours of meeting, there's probably a 5-minute update at a PUC meeting that can cover most of it. And then there are minutes from those meetings that you can have a look at as well if you need to.
Okay.
Okay, so do we need to vote on this, Mike?
Yeah, they'd like you to do that.
Okay.
I would just ask, since things are virtual right now, is that something where Shane can be attending as well? Since there's no, that both of you can go to, or are they only let one person per? I mean, it would
No,
be helpful.
He could attend right now as well.
Okay. I think that'd be good.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. Would one of you like to make that motion that Mike is the representative and Shane is the alternate?
Sure. I'll make this motion. It'll be my turn. Motion for Mike to be the representative and Shane to be the alternate for the SIMPA meetings.
I'll second that.
Great. Is there any further discussion?
I started attending these meetings a couple of years ago when it became really clear that we needed to be a more present part of the organization, particularly as the PUC had some things, a direction they were hoping that SIMPA would be moving. And so just strategically, we had to be there to make that happen. But they meet on the second Wednesdays of the month. So that happens to be a city council meeting date as well. As long as they're virtual, it's not a problem. When they are in person again, there's just some meetings I won't be going to. So, we'll have to have a conversation with Shane again when that starts to be more realistic to see if that is a fair ask of him or whether we need to find somebody else that can do that. But in the meantime, this is going to work out great.
Okay. Good to know. Anything else before we vote? Okay. Tracy?
Aye.
Craig?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Okay. Now can we move on to the late fee discussion, Mike? Do you want
We sure
to
can.
give a little overview of this?
Yeah. So it's been a year about now, almost a year since we've actually taken some policy steps. And back in March of 2020, it was a conversation kind of statewide on whether or not utilities needed to stop doing late fees and shutoffs if that was something that they could do to respond to the emergency. And I think most, if not all, utilities that I'm aware of did that. And part of the conversation at the beginning was we really need to take this action voluntarily so that the state doesn't step in and do something that maybe is beyond what we would want to do. So since about March, we haven't really been shutting anybody off, and we haven't been charging late fees since May or June at least, for sure. And again, the idea was this is in response to the COVID emergency, and it's something that seemed like a good way for us to not add to the problem at the time. Now that it's been some time, we've been monitoring this balance the entire time, but it's time to look at it and show it to you and talk about the policy and if it makes sense still. The balance, the past due balance is $62,000 right now. So that's billings that we've made that people haven't paid us for. And I think a typical balance this time of year is more like $30,000 to $40,000. So there's definitely been some additional non-payment because of COVID or because of our policy or some combination. So when we look at maybe some of the characteristics of the accounts that are past due, we have almost 1,300 utility accounts, and there's 24 of them that have a balance of over $1,000, and 6 that have a balance over $3,000. And
So is that 30 total, or is it 6 of the 24?
6 of the 24.
Okay.
So we're just trying to look at the shape of this curve now, and it's pretty J-shaped. It's a lot of money being held up by a really very small percentage of our customer base. And then there's 11 customers. There might be more, but of these, larger balance ones anyway, there's 11 customers that haven't made any payment of any kind to us since May. That strikes me that this isn't really doing what we wanted it to, which was, there might very well be some of these 24 customers that are in dire straits because of COVID. And we really try hard to not tell stories about why not customers are paying bills. It's not our business.
Sure.
And we don't want to make assumptions about people. But I look at these numbers and I can't help but think there's a lot of folks that are struggling that are still paying their bills on time. There's some folks here that when we make the shift back to charging late fees and shutting people off are going to have a hard time making that transition. So just wanted to put that information in front of you. And then I've got just a couple of questions that you might think about in the memo. Is it still, do we still need to do this? No shutoffs and late fees are waived because of our pandemic emergency that's declared here locally. When we do reinstate late fees, are we going to charge a late fee on the whole past due balance, or are we going to kind of wipe the slate clean and start over on late fees? Are we going to treat businesses different than residential customers? And, what is the right time to make that transition back to charging late fees and doing shutoffs?
Okay, I have a couple questions. One is the 24. What's the balance of individual versus business there?
I think there are probably 3 or 4 businesses in that list.
Okay. So the rest are individual residential. So my other question is, have we reached out in any way to these folks and invited them to set up a payment plan? And should we consider that if we haven't?
Well, that is our typical springtime activity. So what overlays this conversation is the cold weather rule protection, where from October to April, the state has provided some baseline protections to customers that avoid getting shut off.
Right.
It's pretty easy for someone to meet those requirements and avoid getting shut off. And even still, it's rarer for a customer of ours to actually do the things that they would have to do to get those protections. And yet we still don't shut very many people off in the wintertime. I can't think of more than once since I've been here that we've done that. They don't apply at all to businesses, so they can still be shut off in the wintertime. But what happens is we try to get people's balances to zero before October 15th when the cold weather protection sets in.
Right.
So that over the course of a winter, people's expenses will go up and their income's going to go down and they'll start to fall behind. And then when it gets to be about March, we'll start reaching out to folks and saying, just remember that in April, this protection goes away. So if you've built up $1,000 or $1,500 balance, you need to talk to us about how we're going to deal with that. And then our payment plan template is you need to pay us the current every month after April 15th plus 20% of the past due every month, so that you've got that 5 months that you'll be able to get everything back before the October starts again. That's really the only payment plan that we'll accept. Otherwise, it's time to start thinking about, breaking off the relationship. In the midst of all that, we also try to connect folks with as many resources as we can. We know where the help is if people need it, and we try to get them in that direction. But what we've noticed is, and this is probably typical of a lot of places, it's not necessarily people that need help that are on this list. It's people that aren't paying their bill for whatever reason, but it's not that they don't have the money. And a lot of times it's after the third or fourth notice on the door, they come in and pay it off. So we know we're going to get paid eventually by customer X or Y, but in the meantime, they've built up a large balance. And then every once in a while, there's a customer, usually a business type customer, that starts to fall behind. And then we have to start thinking about, are we going to allow this to continue? If we shut them off, they're never going to pay us back any of it. And they'll just disappear as a business. But if we don't shut them off, we might just fall further and further behind forever. So it's kind of a tricky spot. That there's only a couple of businesses on this list, and I don't think they're the businesses that if we did say, you have to pay us or we're going to have to shut you off, that would be terminal to them. So it's more about the individual that's got a $2,500 or $3,500 balance built up over a year, and what I can't imagine how they're going to pay that off in current and 20% a month. So it's going to be a trick.
Yeah. So as of right now, are you thinking to handle it the same way as in the past, is reach out to all these people in March and tell them about the expiration of the cold weather rule and ask for this kind of plan? Or do you think, in your opinion, should something different be done because of COVID?
Well, that is the question I'm asking you.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in your opinions on that. If you still want to waive late fees and don't want us to shut people off, then I don't think there's much point or impetus for folks to come and make a payment plan with us. So that's more of after you've decided it's time to start late fees and shutoffs again, then what we'll do is that process that we normally do, reach out to folks and try to make a payment plan.
I always think there's a certain point where you're not doing anyone a favor when this allows to be, just to continues to accumulate. An individual reaction can just be overwhelming and then nothing happens. It's just like paralyzing. Mm-hmm. So I do think at some point, to be helpful, it has to stop and help them get some control over it again. So to ignore it and just let it go, I don't think is the answer either, whatever we do, but we have to help people help themselves a little bit.
Right. And I was just wondering if there's only 24. I know it's a decent number, but it's a number I can get my head around. Would it be worth trying to reach out to them and find out, what the circumstances are, if there's some way we can work with them to set up a payment plan? Or is it just too many? Or I mean, I do feel like, I mean, even though we kind of see hopefully some light at the end of the tunnel now with vaccines coming in and so on, I mean, people have still been really socked with some economic blows here that they're probably still dealing with. So I kind of feel like we should consider each one individually, since we could do that because we're smaller, but I don't know.
I'm trying to hear the process you're describing, and I've got a few clarifying questions.
Okay.
So when you say we,
the city.
like, is that something that the Utilities Commission wants to be involved in, that relationship with these 24 customers?
I guess I didn't mean that. I guess I was just talking about we as the utility.
Is that I think it's really difficult to try and understand people's personal circumstances in their finances.
Right. No.
And so, like, when you're saying then, make an individual judgment about each of these 24, I'm not sure what are the criteria that you're thinking we were
Well, I don't mean that. I don't necessarily mean that we should make a judgment. I'm just saying, should a personal letter or some sort of communication go to these folks and just explain the situation and say, we need some kind of payment to be starting. Can you work with us on that or something? I don't know. I have not been involved in, trying to collect money before, but I feel like, I mean, we can't cut people off before April anyway. And it'd be nice to give people the benefit of the doubt in this time and just try to help them set something up, like Tracy said, to help them, plan it out, at least to have a small plan for paying back. I don't know. Craig, what do you think? I mean, you run a business.
Well, I think now that, I mean, I know some businesses have been affected a lot more than others with this COVID, obviously being shut completely down. But now that, let's see, they've been open now for a week, 2 weeks. Maybe by April, with the 50% capacity in bars and restaurants, I think that would help a little cash flow to them. So yeah, I don't know. I think that most businesses anyway, by that point in time, should be able to at least make some type of payment towards their bill. Maybe not take care of all of it, but at least show the city that they're gonna, like Tracy said, you just can't keep selling power and not getting any money back. So I mean, I don't know what you're talking about, Mike. Average this time of year, usually we're sitting on 30 to 40,000 of receivables, and that's a kind of almost double right now.
Yeah, that's right.
So normally, though, you would reach out and offer this, you have a current plan, which is to say pay off 20% plus current.
Yeah.
So do we do that, continue to do that as what our plan would be? And would you start reaching out now, or do you wait until April? I don't remember what you said about timeline. Do you try to get to them starting now in March?
Well, I'd say in a month we start talking to people normally.
Okay.
Right now, though,
March.
I mean, obviously it's on the agenda because we're thinking about it right now.
Yeah.
That's just a little more than is normal, and for some customers it's a lot more than is normal, and so they might need a little extra time. So I do think we want to reach out to folks, and so that's really the question is, what are the parameters of
Mhm.
What are we going to tell them? Are we going to tell them we've started talking about when late fees are going to be reinstated? I mean, that much is accurate so far, but we can't really say the PUC has directed us to reinstate late fees starting in April and shutoffs, and so let's figure out how to deal with this balance. So I mean, we can reach out right now with just, hey, you should know we're talking about this. You know, contact us if you need help, and let's figure out how to deal with this. And then in a month or two, you can set a policy that's more like, this is the date we're going to start charging late fees, and we can reach out again and say, now this is the deal for everybody.
I think that's a good idea. We give people a little heads up since it's only early February now. I'm sorry, Tracy, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So unless there's late fees, do you feel you won't catch someone's attention? Or so if you said we are going to expect payments to begin by May, that'd be right? April doesn't count. It's by May. We expect to have a worked out payment plan with you. You need to be caught up by October 31st. If not, then we will once again, this suggestion, then we will, late fees will begin assessing. Or if we don't start having late fees when we come up with a payment plan, there'll be no teeth to it? Okay. So unless, okay.
The late fees serve another purpose too, and most of the folks that don't pay their bill on time pay their bill, and oftentimes not very far after the due date, and it's almost like they don't even think about their bill until we send them a late fee and stick in and a shut-off notice on their door, and then they're like, oh yes, I remember, and come in and pay it. And so there's all this extra effort required to basically babysit 30 or 40 of our customers who are serial, not on-time payers, and this late fee kind of funds that effort, which is good because we don't want the rest of our customers to have to pay for that babysitting of those 30 or 40 people.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think getting the late fees reinstated when we feel that it's not counterproductive to the COVID emergency is very important. Yes.
So is a compromise maybe to say, the slate is clean, which you mentioned earlier. Is the slate clean now, but it will start as of May as part of the
COVID thing.
Yeah, to say, okay, we will remove the late fees accumulated to date, but they will start accumulating as of May 1st again, and we need to have a payment plan in place with you. We need to work with you to have a payment plan so it's resolved by November or end of October.
Yeah, I think that, we don't need to be done talking about this today, but just to kind of talk through some of those ideas and let them marinate for a little while. The idea of, we might charge 8% on past due, and we only do that one time. So they don't pay their May bill, and that entire balance of May gets an 8% charge tacked onto it. But if they don't pay it in June, we only charge 8% on the current, rather than, the whole thing just being compounded over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
But we haven't charged 8% on any of these balances that are out there now. And so if we were to say, if we follow our normal policy, that entire past due balance is going to get charged 8% one time. And so if somebody owes us $2,500, we're charging 8% on that one time, and that's the late fee. Maybe there's a way for us to build in some timing that says we won't charge any of this past due balance a late fee if you pay it by July 1st, but after that we're going to charge all of it 8%, or something like that, so that there's some incentive built in to get people to make some headway on it, and for those that can make some headway faster on it,
and show we're respecting what's been happening, and kind of meet them on this a little bit. Mm-hmm.
That sounds good.
Agree with that.
Well, if you're all willing to keep thinking about it, we'll work on some ideas, and then maybe we'll bring it to the next meeting with some suggestions.
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? Okay, then I guess our second to last item is the request from the Congregational Church regarding some sort of misunderstanding on their dual fuel bill.
Off-peak.
So we didn't include this in the packet, but you were all sent an email separately. So just as a background, why we didn't include this in the packet and why, when we're talking about late fees and other things, we're not using real world examples. I mean, other than we just don't want to embarrass anybody, that there's also some data privacy rules, particularly when it comes to electric data. That's all confidential information. So when the First Congregational Church sends a memo that includes details about their electric bills, that data is not something that we can share with the public. If it's in the packet, it's shared with the public. Now, maybe they waive that right by sending it to you separately, but it seems like it's easier this way to just leave that information out. So when we're talking about this, just keep in mind that particular data about their electric usage and bills is actually private, and we can't talk about it in a public meeting. But we can talk about the policy and the issue without getting into the private data, I think.
Okay.
So just some quick background. We have historically operated a few systems that give people discounts on electric rates for allowing us to control when they can use particular things. And it's mostly been electric heat that is used for, but it's also been credits for water heaters that are controllable and a few other things. That system used a technology called power line carrier, where we actually injected a signal onto the electric lines that then a piece of equipment in somebody's house would read that signal and turn a relay switch on or off. That's how we would control somebody's off-peak heat, for instance, where it would run during the night and then they'd have some storage capacity and we'd shut it off, and then during the day they'd get heat from storage. It also is how we controlled dual fuel systems, where they use electric heat most of the time, but they have a backup system for days when we turn off their electric heat because the load on our system is too high. So the Congregational Church is one of our customers for a controllable electric heat system. And a few years ago, they and many of our other customers stopped getting controlled altogether because the power line carrier is just a technology that didn't work very well and was not maintainable and was using software and equipment that was decades old and we couldn't find replacement parts for it. So we just decided, okay, we can't keep maintaining this. We need to find a replacement system, which we have now. The AMI meters that we're using for electric, one of the things that they allow us to do is send that signal out over the AMI's broadcast spectrum, and then have relay switches that are in people's houses that are connected via Wi-Fi to the AMI meter, basically. And now we are controlling people, but only after we go to their place and install one of these AMI-ready load control receivers, which is something that we were doing for our customers, and then COVID came around, and we haven't really been able to hire an electrician and get into people's houses and inspect their wiring and make sure that it's connected appropriately, and that all that stuff is required. But in the meantime, we had maybe 100 or so heat customers that probably still thought that everything was hunky-dory with their system and had no idea that they were not being controlled. And we worked very diligently to get all of their attention and let them know, you're not being controlled. We need you to contact us, make arrangements with us to get a new piece of equipment installed. So one of the issues around that is, how long do we allow these folks to continue to use the lower cost energy when we're not benefiting from the controlling of it? And it didn't seem fair to just pull the rug out from under folks, because it's fairly expensive installation for somebody to put a dual fuel or an off-peak system in, and they're doing that with the assumption that they're going to be able to get this cheaper energy. But at some point, when we try to get into their places of business, their house, and we are unable to, then we have to stop with the discounted rate and charge them the full rate. This notice that we sent out then that the Congregational Church is telling you they didn't see was kind of one of our later efforts to tell all of our customers, if you don't contact us, we're going to add this surcharge to your bill. The surcharge is basically the difference between the discounted electric rate and the retail rate. So it's basically is just taking the discounted rate away. But because it's a surcharge, we can track it separately and we can make decisions about this very issue that's in front of you. Should we credit it or not credit it? So they're saying they didn't see the notice. I have no reason to believe that's not true, even though most of our customers did. They're also saying they didn't see the surcharge on their bill until months and months later, which again, I don't have any reason to believe that's not true. I've been on a church board too, so I kind of know that, we're really lucky when we get a good finance person that wants to dig in, and sometimes there's transitional periods. So that all makes perfect sense to me that that's what happened up there, and they're asking for a discount on this. So, why would you say yes or no to this? Well, you might say no to this because there's lots of other customers out there that just haven't responded and are dragging their feet because they don't want to get a controller installed, or they don't want to have to deal with this at all, but they're taking advantage of the lower rates still. And you don't want to set a precedent where we're going to not, or we'll give everybody a credit if they just come and ask for it. And why would you say yes to this? Because, you think that, they're asking in good stead, and they have every intention of getting the equipment installed, and just seems like a fair request.
I have a question. Who pays for the installation of the new equipment?
That's a customer's responsibility, but there's also some costs that we have to pay. So we are buying controllers, and there's some of our own staff time, potentially a lot if it's a complicated system, for our staff to be involved. But to have and any wiring work that needs to be done to make sure that they're actually controlling what they say they're controlling and nothing else, and then to get the load control receivers installed, that's something that the customers have to do.
And you're saying most have responded to this notice? There's just a few really left that are kind of outliers for whatever reason, but
yeah,
for the
and
most part it's over with.
Unfortunately, the COVID situation really put a stop to all of our efforts working on this. So this notice went out after we were really getting up to speed on installing new equipment, and after we had populated our waiting list of folks quite a bit. And then, we still have that same waiting list basically, because this isn't something that we felt comfortable asking people to do. Let us bring a third party and a fourth party into your home to do some wiring. And it just is on hold right now. So that they're not going to be alone, and there'll be other customers who are going to say, hey, I didn't see it and I didn't know about it and I want a credit too. In the meantime, if people come and talk to us now, what our practice is, again, is take the last month's surcharge off, not the entirety of it, the past 10 months, for instance, that they're asking for, but just last month's surcharge off, and to not charge any future surcharges and keep them on our waiting list until we can get in there and get it fixed.
That's a tough one.
I'm kind of still struggling why we can't. Are we just not even giving people the option to go ahead and get this taken care of? I mean, is that part of it? I can understand if someone doesn't feel comfortable having someone in their home, but if they want this to move forward, we would help them make it happen, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, the way this has gone has been if it wasn't us constantly prodding, then no one would make it move forward.
But I mean, COVID related, like right now, if someone like the church or whoever said, okay, let's get this done, get this equipment set up or whatever, we're not saying, oh, we're not doing it because of COVID, or are we?
There hasn't been that situation yet. And I don't think we'd say we're not doing this.
Okay.
They're saying they didn't know, right?
Yeah.
We're just not reaching out to people and trying to push the issue right now.
Right. But the issue in this particular circumstance is they're saying they didn't realize that this had to happen until very recently. Right? Because, and with all due respect to the church or any church, I mean, nobody's living there. So it would seem fairly safe that a technician could come in and do some work, you know, maybe a couple days from when they might have their next event or something. It would be safe.
Yeah.
But that's not really the issue. It's just that they didn't see it.
Yeah, I guess I look at it as an issue only from the standpoint of, you know, how can we really charge anybody if we, which doesn't sound like we are, but if we were the ones that we're saying with COVID, we're not going to move this installation forward, you know, then I'd say, okay, yeah, I guess we better adjust accordingly. But if you're just being respectful of what someone might feel, but you would still be fine in helping them get this done, then I feel like, okay, it's still a choice. You can attend to this, which is still separate from the fact that they're saying they missed this note, but whatever.
At this point, we're not charging them anymore. Because as soon as anybody contacts us, we take that act of good faith and put them on our waiting list to get the installation done. And we don't charge the surcharge after that. So they don't have it moving forward.
Okay.
Okay. So do you have a recommendation, Mike, for how you want it to be handled? That you want us to consider?
Well, I like I said, what we normally have done in this circumstance, and it hasn't been this long or this amount, is we take the last month's surcharge off and we don't charge them anymore. So, you know, to this point, that's been good for people. Nobody's said, no, you need to, I want to go to the PUC and talk about it. But I don't really have a recommendation beyond that's our practice that's been functioning.
Okay, I mean, has the person who wrote to the commission been told that that's our usual policy, or has there been, yes? Okay.
So how does that affect their bill then? Did this go on for just the month of December?
No,
No, it went on for
like 10 months, right? 8 or 9 or 10 months?
December of last.
So it's like $1,400. Is that what I saw on this note? Yeah. The extra cost for 2020 was roughly $1,500.
2020.
I mean, at this point, Mike, just like to have a policy to apply, you know, if it goes broad. I mean, are we talking a lot of money when you put all of these together? You know, we're looking at $1,500 here. You know, what does that really affect the city if the answer is to credit back, you know, more than just this?
There's probably another few dozen customers that haven't contacted us.
Okay.
That are on
60 or 70 that we have on our list that we're not charging this fee to anymore. So it's not, I mean, it's not like we're in some sort of financial peril issue that it affect the city, but it is, you know, whenever we think about fees and somebody's bill, I try to keep in mind anyway that it's not my money, right? It's all the utility customers are paying into the system. And so if we're giving this refund, we're taking it from the other customers to give to this customer. And if that's the right thing to do, then that's okay. But that's the way I try to rationalize it anyhow. Is it's not from the city, because of course we've got plenty of money to operate with. This won't be an issue for us financially, but it is, philosophically anyway, asking other customers to pay this extra cost.
Might there be some sort of compromise arrangement where we offer to take off half or a third of it or something, rather than the whole amount? Or I don't know.
You have a discretion to do any sort of deal you want. I mean, I don't think that we're going to be able to negotiate something that everybody comes away happy with, that kind of thing. You get to decide what you want the bill to say.
Right.
So if you think that that's the fair offer, then let us know, and that's what we'll make to them.
Well, and when you
go ahead, Tracy.
Well, Mike, when you said you're asking the rest of the utility customers to pay this, I mean, were we, and this is where I may have missed, so the technology wasn't working correctly. So were they not running their dual fuel then correctly either? Were they tapping in to electricity at times they should not have been because of this? Or were they still
Yes.
following their normal, off cycle times or whatever? So, I mean, in a sense, it doesn't really matter. I mean,
yeah, and there wasn't anything nefarious on their part where they were, operating this when they shouldn't have. I wouldn't say it like that, but
right.
The whole basis of why the utility offers a lower rate is because it saves the system money, and when we're not able to control them, there is no savings. So there's no basis for a cheaper rate.
So yes, that's all I wanted to clear, because when I think through that logic, then you're asking the rest of the users to pay this difference. Well, okay, yeah, if they really were utilizing electricity at all the wrong, not through the pathway that was supposed to save us money, then yeah, I guess they're part of the whole group then at that time.
I guess to me the issue, because of the equipment not working properly anymore, kind of sounds like a joint responsibility issue to me between the customer and the city. And I'm wondering if there's some way we can recognize that with, reaching out to forgive part of that bill. I don't know. I guess that would be my hope, but I understand what you're saying about not wanting to burden the rest of the people.
Well, I only say that as a way to get away from the thought of, well, we've got $5 million in the bank. What do we care about $1,500? It's no big deal. Obviously we're not, there's nobody else that's going to get this $1,500. We're not sending bills out to the rest of our customers to get them to pay this. We're not going to actually transport the cash from the neighbors to this place. That's more of just a semantic exercise.
Sure.
And the whole idea of extra cost, we couldn't really go back in time and determine, did we miss out on $1,500 savings because of this over the past year? Or was it 500 or was it 5,000? We really can't do the math on it. So.
Are they on the dual fuel? They have new equipment now, or what's the status of their? I'm just trying to figure out, they went to a higher rate because their system wasn't working correctly. Is that what happened?
Their system was not changed. So their dual fuel system is operating, and a dual fuel system basically means they just use electric heat, like a normal electric heat customer. Whenever they want heat, they turn it on, it runs, and then we turn it off when the load on our system reaches a certain point. Right. So because the controller didn't work, we're not able to turn it off.
Right.
And they're using it during times when we're paying peak rates rather than avoiding that.
So it's not anything that the customer did to not make the controller work? No,
they didn't do anything wrong here. Okay. So when you're talking about like trying to recognize some sort of joint responsibility, that is absolutely accurate, that there wasn't any action on their part other than just missing our notice that says, hey, give us a call.
Okay.
They didn't do anything with the equipment.
Right. Well, and your notice does say that, that equipment does need to be inspected and a receiver upgraded. Like you say, that may not, right? Light bulbs might not totally go on with somebody when they see that. Maybe the way it's written should be like, you need to call us now. You need upgrade, whatever. Maybe there's other ways to write this notice to be more eye-catching or more direct, but it is in there that, they need an upgrade. But yeah, there is sort of certain ways to write something to hopefully, like, whoa, bing, 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 bing. But it is there.
Yeah, our strategy was not to rely on the message, but to rely on the actual charge on the bill to get people's attention. And it did, for the most part, get people's attention. I mean, the different strategy would have been to say, attention customers, we're not offering dual fuel anymore because our system's not operating. And we talked about doing that too. And honestly, that's still on the table for folks that don't contact us, rather than continuing to charge this surcharge. We're just going to say, hey, if you haven't contacted us in a year, we're just going to assume you don't want to be on the system anymore. We're going to take you off it. And then if you want to be on, you're going to be a new customer like anybody else that needs to get their equipment installed and inspected and make sure it works.
That makes some sense. But I mean, back to the church. Should we? I mean, what do you guys think, Tracy or Craig? I mean,
their numbers work out. Is that actually what they calculated as $1,400 too much? Is that kind of that's the overage, basically, what you calculate also, or based on their normal bill?
I think so, but I'm not 100% sure of that, Craig. I mean, I know we've looked at it. I also know that we have the ability to just look and see what that specific surcharge total has been since the beginning, since it's a special rate that we created. Okay. So if you want to do a portion of it or something, we can truth test the number before we go forward on that.
Okay.
Tracy, what do you think?
Well, I do stop and say, kind of, and Mike, you said this earlier in the conversation, and it's sort of a different but related thing is, someone's budget is not where I go around this decision, because that's not mine to control, what your issues are that way. That said, I do want to make sure that however we decide this should be tonight, we can uniformly then apply this to any of the remaining customers, and we feel comfortable with that, so that they're not an exception or different. We can say, okay, this is what we've decided, and this is what we're going to do with everybody. And then I just want to make sure in a really clear way that everyone knows that if you want to do this, this is what you need to do. And we really need to get that in front of their noses and make sure they, either like a sign off, you need to do this, or something back and forth. They have to acknowledge they have a choice here going forward, so there won't be any more confusion.
Right.
But that's all. I just want to make sure whatever we do, I don't think the money is big. To me, it isn't really a money issue. It's just that we have a consistent decision that we can apply across the board. And the other 60 or 70 who have said nothing to you, are they going to come back now and say, well, wait a minute, we would like our money too? And are we willing then to say, okay, what was our logic when we did this?
Yeah, I appreciate that sentiment, Tracy. That's what I would hope to get here too, is something that we can use uniformly for all of them. As a matter of fact, I can imagine whatever the deal is that you decide to go forward with the church, that we would just automatically apply that to everyone we haven't heard from. Send them a notice that says, we haven't heard from you. Here's how we're resolving this. This is a refund of this amount of the surcharge based on the PUC's policy, and we're discontinuing your involvement in the program. If you'd like to be involved in the program, here's how you do it.
Because there is still that whole issue. Like you said, you have been trying to reach these people. You know, COVID kind of blew everything up, but you were trying to reach these people. It sounds like you didn't necessarily get a response in a really timely manner in general. So yeah, you have to kind of address that going forward.
Well,
Oh,
a thought, you don't
was
have
the-
to decide today.
yeah.
I mean, I know that they'd like this issue resolved, but if you'd
Yeah.
rather us gather some more information about who else is in this situation and what the total balances are, so that if you do want to do a uniform solution, you know what the total is we're dealing with. Maybe that would make some sense.
Yeah,
We come back next
that would
month and
make
address
sense.
it.
That would make sense to me.
And the old policy was to take away the last month's surcharge.
Yeah.
And what would that amount on this bill? Was that? What should have been
It looks like it was just under $200.
January's? Okay. All right.
Well, I like that idea, Mike. If you could gather more information and see how many accounts we're dealing with and what the total dollar amount would be, perhaps we could revisit this next time and come up with a policy that would apply to everyone across the board.
So did everybody fall off the normal? Did this start happening to all these accounts at the same time?
All the accounts of people that haven't contacted us, yes, it happened at the same
Okay.
time.
Okay. Okay.
And so not just a policy, but we also need to very clearly have a way to contact these people, make sure they're acknowledging this change and their decision of what they want to do. That we won't just wait to see that it's another slip in a bill that nobody pays attention to. Some way to be
Right.
clear.
Yeah, if they want to be
Yeah,
in dual fuel, they got to get the right equipment installed, or it's not going to work.
Right.
You know.
Because yeah, I mean, you've obviously tried to make this work, and so we just really need to help you do that. You know, to them to acknowledge whatever changes they need to make.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? Anything else? I think our next item is adjournment.
Let's make it.
Congratulations, everybody, on a successful first meeting.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Must be time for cookies or something then.
At least.